Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your valuable time right here, the Adapt 2030 channel. Hurricane Idalia. We see the track going right over Georgia, South Carolina. Can we say peanut production, United States, damaged? Peaches also. Remember the California floods. Doksuri screamed over China just a couple weeks ago. Heaviest rainfall in 140 years. Peanut production, bullseye. And over to India, allotting now rice exports to their friends, Bhutan, Singapore, and Mauritius. Speaking of the beach, think you could find your bike again? And weathercasters, when you point out their narrative buildings, never want to have a conversation in the new world. Going to start you off here, electrified skies. This is what we can expect moving forward as the sun's magnetic fields canceling themselves out. The result is our jet streams and cloud cells bunching, rivers from the sky, atmospheric compression events, lost crops. We're starting to see a lot of disruption across the planet. But of course, there was an excuse built in for you. And we're starting to see it across the airwaves play out in real time. Here comes Hurricane Idalia. Check out the track. It did make landfall category 3, but you see where it tracks to Georgia and South Carolina. Very interesting. Look at the wind speeds there. Still looking at the minimum gale 40 mile per hour all the way up to hurricane plus strength. So as we follow the track, National Hurricane Center telling us, it's going to be between 74 and, somewhere around 119 miles per hour as the remnants move over. But let's follow it over the peanut production areas of the United States that should be harvesting, in about a week or two. You could probably write a lot of this in the major crop areas off due to heavy rain and winds. Right there in the bend, all the way through South Carolina and Georgia. And looking at the peanut producing states, Georgia, number 1 in the U.S., we do find South Carolina and Florida both in those positions as well. So, if you're looking exclusively at the United States, we could take some peanut production offline. So will that really hit the global price? Not sure, unless there's another major player also experiencing something to do with the peanut shortages. So I decided to come into the Georgia county estimates. Now, obviously, land masses don't change. So this map here, even though it's from 2018-19, is still valid of the largest peanut producing areas. And if you look at the track of that hurricane, going right over those same areas. And if we take a look at the southern part of South Carolina, we can see the same. That track will go directly over these areas, scratch them off. So let's take a look at global production here. China, number 1, Henan, Shandong, Liaoning, Guangdong, and Hebei. And then we come into India, Nigeria, and then the United States. Well, what's so interesting, if we're going to map up massive destruction of crops, we need to look no further than Typhoon Doksuri, which was at the beginning of this month. And you might say, well, I didn't hear about that one. You should have. It was the heaviest rainfall in 140 years in Beijing, flooding downtown, flooding all these areas. 140-year flood across China through the crop zones and the capital itself. So where's the peanut production? Yeah, Henan and Shandong, those areas. It's exactly where these massive floods are. And you say, well, how big could the floods really be out there? Well, this gives you a good glimpse here. There's a road under there. Crops are submerged is a good term for that. And if we're looking at Zhuozhou, that's in Hebei. Main thoroughfare underwater, and as we get further abreast out into the different types of fields, corn is what you're looking at here. A lot of losses. So countryside areas got hit the worst. They diverted a huge amount of that water away from Beijing, which is this is what it looked like downtown. They didn't want the capital to flood too much, nor in the central business district areas. And these are the floods in downtown Beijing. Jerome Powell and the Fed raised rates for the 11th time in July. The Hill warned it's a mistake that could spark a recession. Economists believe this is the last rate hike in the most aggressive rate hike cycle in history. Rate hikes are typically headwinds for gold. Meanwhile, gold has gone up over 20% since 2022. Imagine where gold and silver are going to go when the Fed stops raising and starts cutting. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. So now we're looking at multiples on major players across the planet that produce peanut. But then again, I thought I'd throw the corn chart in here in the same areas in Hunan, Hebei, and Shandong. And you look for China on a voracious buying spree. They lost so much in the fields because of this flood. So peanut price is probably going to increase if you're a fan of that. So if you want to get some peanut butter for your preps, you might want to get a few more jars while you're out there. And also, the rainfall's in the wrong place. For hydropower, at least. Like, they're having sort of a drought that's ongoing in the areas where the predominant large amounts of hydroelectric is produced. Yet in some areas where they're not producing hydroelectric, relying on coal, massive floods. So, you know, there's mix-ups everywhere. So their hydrological cycle is also being disrupted. Electromagnetic effects from our sun. So back to the hurricane again. Follow the track through Georgia, South Carolina, a little bit in North Carolina there. Let's talk peaches. Major peach areas. Obviously, you can see 8 and 11 on the right side there, just above Florida. And it might go, wow, it's hardly any. I'll agree, it's not really the lion's share of production, but we look at California. Oh, wait. Remember the hurricane that went up there with the record floods in California? That area. So if we subtract California production, we subtract South Carolina production, we subtract Georgia production, we're going to see some prices in peaches or non-availability. That's almost a given. So that would leave us with at least a couple of easy calls that you can find on this. So moving forward, you know, it's been quite the atrocious year globally for a lot of products, foodstuffs. So just expect your food prices to increase from here. It's going to keep going up, and these losses are going to mount. Now, as we come into the southern hemisphere again, I've said Hunga Tonga eruption many a time, with the mesospheric ice crystal clouds and then the ozone breaking down on that ice surface in the mesosphere. And the ozone hole this year is probably going to eclipse the largest that we've ever seen in the year 2000. It'll probably go wider than that. But again, if you're going to get UVB radiation striking the ground, well, barley is the #1 crop affected by UVB radiation. So as we come into the southern hemisphere planting, maturation of the crops there, we're going to start to see losses. So then where do we make up this food? You don't. You grow it yourself locally in your own grow zone around your house and your neighborhood. Because rice, that's a easy prepper stock there. Rice and beans, as long as you can keep that dry somewhere, stored, cool. So India, you remember, they had cut off all rice exports. But coming into the new BRICS friends and family groups here, they're going to be allotting for their special friends rice that's not available to others. The non-basmati white rice is going to Bhutan, one of their direct neighbors, 79,000 metric tons, but then Singapore and Mauritius, which is an island off of Eastern Africa, right near Reunion. That's only a sliver of a sliver of a sliver, and you notice who they gave it to. None of the Western powers got a piece of that, now did they? It's going to be like this moving forward. All resources are going to be diverted into the club. Now, since we're talking about beaches and hurricanes and landfalls, let's take a look at the Netherlands. This is bicycle parking. Now, do you think you could find your bike after this? Now, with all this talk of heat everywhere, I did want to bring this back. I had this slide, and I came across it in a file when I was getting some things ready for this, because I had some of those corn charts in another. I covered the flood in a previous video in Beijing. So the potential record lows, and that was on August 14th. Did anybody hear about this news story? Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska were touching near record low temperatures. So the potential record lows were forecast 51 degrees and the record temp cold was 48. So that's 3 degrees different. And over in Goodland, Kansas, they were forecasting 51 or 50 degrees and the old temperature was 49 degrees. So that's about, 2 degrees. And 50 at 51, that would have broken the record there, the forecast. So that's 1 degree difference. And if we come down to Colby, Kansas, 51, 49. These are all 1 to 2 degree Fahrenheit differences. So that's near record lows, potential record lows. I get it. 1 to 2 degree Fahrenheit, I'll agree with that. But then we have WATE 6, Knoxville's most accurate forecasts. And you'll see the old record low at the bottom of each of those, 1952, 1995. Now, the old record was 101 degree Fahrenheit in 1952. Yet the forecast high was 95, but look at that, near record highs. That's 6 degrees, 6 away from the record. That is what we call pushing the narrative. So I was very clean, and I wrote over to Ken, a newscaster no less, news broadcaster who should be able to communicate. I wrote, what's that garbage? Near record high global warming scare tactic, 6 degrees below the record high, 1953. I miswrote that. It should have been 1952. Well short of the record. Why would you even state something like that unless it's agenda driven? And I really wanted to start the conversation with somebody who's a professional, but instead of having a conversation, blocked. And this is the way it is in the new world. You're not going to have a conversation about these issues. It's going to be block, and I'm going to continue to push the narrative. It's kind of sad to see that a newscaster can't even defend the reason that they put the news up into the news feed. Hey, I'm a citizen out here just asking some questions. Seems to be way off on the forecast, and why would you put such a thing? 6 degrees. 1 or 2 degrees? Okay, that's really close to a new record. But 6, at that point, seems like it's on the payroll of not just the newscasting station, but keeping the job. Chief Weatherman, you don't get that position unless you've jumped through all the hoops and hurdles, keeping the narrative alive. And like I said, we're going to be responsible for growing some of our own food. Check out Marjorie Wildcraft, the Grow Network. She's got a free webinar on how to get up your homesteading skills, grow some food, compost, and soil. That link's in the description box. Again, it's a free. I think it's such pertinent information. And if you've never delved into this type of homesteading lifestyle before, this is a great place to start. I do appreciate your time. Hope you got something out of the video. Bye for now.